Coming up on today's episode of the Moneypants Superpower Hour. This week we are hosting a match, Allowances versus Moneypants. The majority of Americans believe it is critical for parents to teach their children to be financially responsible. So most parents pay their children a weekly allowance with the expectation that it will teach their children to be financially savvy. But is this approach actually working? How well does an allowance actually prepare children to become financially responsible adults? We will be breaking down exactly what qualities make an adult financially responsible. We will then be comparing an allowance with the Moneypants approach and show why Moneypants clearly beats out an allowance every time. We will also discuss why some parents have decided to forego paying their kids entirely and why that could be a mistake. All this and more, but first, the joke of the day.
A Jewish rabbi goes to get his hair cut at the barber's. As he's about to pay, the barber refuses and says, "No, Rabbi, you're doing God's work. This haircut is free." The next day, the barber goes into a shop to find 12 fresh fish on his doorstep from the rabbi. A week later, the barber's cutting a Catholic priest's hair. And as the priest gets out his money to pay, the barber says, "No, Father, you're doing God's work. This haircut is free." The next day, the barber finds 12 freshly baked loaves of bread on his doorstep. A couple weeks later, the barber's cutting an LDS missionary's hair, and the missionary's about to pay. Once again, the barber refuses and says, "No, you're doing God's work. This haircut is free." The next morning, the barber goes to a shop to find 12 missionaries on his doorstep. Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Moneypants Superpower Hour. We're your hosts, Hannah and Fontaine Judd, and we're the proud parents of 8 sons and 7 daughters, ranging in age from newborn to college student. We're both BYU graduates and the creators of Moneypants. Head on over to CaptainMoneyPants.com to learn more about what we do and what we're all about. We believe every person on this planet has been given at least one superpower to help them accomplish their unique mission in life. But the only way to unlock those superpowers is through work ethic. That's when greatness happens. And that's where Moneypants comes in. Moneypants is the complete tool set for cultivating work ethic in all aspects of a person's life. Today's topic is Moneypants versus Allowances. You know, and it kind of sounds like a prize fight. In this corner, weighing in at 188 pounds, the spokesman of the spoiled, the lackluster lounge lizard of laziness, the master of disaster, Dr. Entitlement. And in this corner, weighing in at a lean 205 pounds, the walking warehouse of work ethic, the sage of satisfying superpowers, the colossal Captain Moneypants. Are you ready to rumble? That's what it kind of feels like, a prize fight, right?
Yeah.
Well, we are going to kind of compare how, because, you know, on the website it says, so much smarter than an allowance. Moneypants is so much smarter than an allowance. Because it's not actually an allowance. We don't say, oh, it's the best type of allowance. We say it's better than an allowance. Because it's not. Moneypants is not an allowance. And I wanted to kind of compare the two. Like, what's the difference between an allowance and Moneypants? And, I think, first off, we should probably define what an allowance is.
Different people have different definitions for an allowance. Some people say that if you connect work to the pay, they don't call it an allowance anymore. And other people, if you're paying your kids money, that's an allowance.
Okay.
Regardless of whether it's connected to work. So different people have different definitions.
But the basic concept, though, is any money that parents pay their kids is an allowance, kind of. That's kind of how they define it.
That's the more common definition. But we did have one person once chime into one of our blogs and give us all these definitions and telling us, oh no, this is what an allowance is, and telling us, you know, and being very specific. And so, there are different people have different definitions. So, but the definition we're going to go with today
is an allowance is when you give your kids a certain amount of money, usually on a weekly basis, and it's sometimes tied to chores. That's the conventional definition of allowance. We're going to go with that. And just a little bit of backstory. I found it interesting when we were researching this topic, Hannah. You told me that because I thought allowances came into vogue like in the 80s, Turns out the concept of an allowance as we understand it today came about in about 1912.
Yeah, that's when it became popular. Yeah, according to Wikipedia.
So I was kind of surprised about that. I'm like, wow, this concept's been around for a long time.
Well, I remember watching the Andy Griffith show with the kids, and the dad had his son earning an allowance for doing his chores. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the understood at that time that, hey, you can earn your pocket money from getting your chores done.
That was the expectation.
Yeah.
So I guess the real question is, why do parents pay their kids allowances? And we've talked about this a little bit. Why would parents pay their kids an allowance? And we had to think about it, and we're like, well, and we did some research, and we finally kind of distilled it down into the main idea. The main reason parents pay their kids an allowance is, on some level, whether it's specific or otherwise, they want their kids to learn to become financially responsible adults. That's the end goal. Now, some parents, obviously, they'll pay their kids an allowance just to get them out of their hair, or because they want their kids to handle money or whatever. But deep down, at the end of the day, the end goal, for the most part, is parents pay their kids an allowance to teach them to become financially responsible adults. That's what they want. That's their hope, actually. And we actually found out that 92% of Americans believe it's important for their kids to understand how to effectively manage their money. 92%.
And that was from the CPA's.
Their study that they did?
Yeah,
American Institute of CPAs.
Yeah, the American Institute of CPAs, when they interviewed people, 92%, the vast majority of people were like, yeah, it's really important to teach your kids to become financially responsible.
And one of the ways they decided to do that, a lot of parents, more than half, you give an allowance of some sort in this country. And the expectations are, and here they are, these are the expectations. They want, when parents pay their kids an allowance, they have 5 basic expectations when they pay these allowances. They want someone who works and earns money for their, let me back up. The expectations are that their kids will become financially responsible. And we had to define that. What does financial responsibility mean? Well, it's someone, then there's 5 parts of it. Someone who works and earns money for their expenses. In other words, they're not living in mom's basement. It's an adult who pays their bills and obligations on time. And actually that's how credit companies define financial responsibility. It's an adult who has discipline and foresight to set money aside for future goals and emergencies. Number 4, it's an adult who creates a spending plan and sticks to it. And number 5 is someone who avoids debt. And those are the basic expectations that parents have when they give their kids money, is that when they give their kids an allowance, that their kids will learn these things, that they'll learn, 1, to work and earn their money. Number 2, they'll learn to pay their bills and obligations on time. Number 3, they'll develop discipline and foresight to set money aside. Number 4, they'll create a spending plan and stick to it. And number 5, they'll avoid debt. Yeah. Those are the end goals, the expectations when you give kids an allowance.
Yeah, they're hoping that the allowance will be a bridge leading to those qualities of a financially responsible adult.
And let's break those down. Expectation number 1 is that giving a kids an allowance will teach them to become someone who works and earns money. For parents who don't tie allowances to chores, that's kind of a silly expectation, yet it's still there. That somehow, if I give my kids money, they'll want to work. Like, it's laughable if you think about it, but that's actually the expectation, that somehow my kids will learn work ethic if I give them money. And how would they learn that? If they never have a job to do, how are they going to learn to work? So that's kind of a silly expectation. But for the parents that do tie allowances to chores, okay, well, that has more of a chance to be successful. The kids learning to work if their allowance is tied to chores. The problem, though, is that a lot of times when parents tie allowances to chores, the parents are like, what have I done? I've just given myself another task because now I have to be the one to track the chores, and the kids are fighting me on it, and I have to do inspections, and then they're complaining that it's not fair because Billy got paid more, or I did more work for him than he did, and
or they don't want to work because they have all the money they want, and so they take a break from working, and which is then even more frustrating.
well, you just end up nagging your kids to try to get them to work, and well, and then there's the question of who gets paid what, and I've heard this before where, oh, well, the older the kids get, the more you should pay them. And I'm like, well, really? What? Why? Because you're older, you get paid more.
If they're contributing more.
Yeah, maybe if they're doing more things or maybe higher end things. But no, it's just kind of across the board. There's this mentality that older kids should get paid more because they have more expenses. And I'm thinking, man, wouldn't it be great if society worked that way? The older I get, the more I make because I have more expenses. That doesn't work that way. No, the whole idea is that it's kind of a hard thing to manage when you don't have like rules set up of who gets paid what. You were telling me about a mom blogger, Hannah, who she just finally gave up. She's like, I can't do allowances.
She was like, because there were too many question marks on how to handle these issues. So finally she's like, you know what? I'm just going to give my kids money at the end of the week and not have it tied to chores because she didn't want to deal with trying to figure all that out. She just gave up on it. And so she's like, okay, I'm going to give the kids money so they can have money to handle. And I'm going to give it to them based on how old they are. My 5-year-old gets $5. My 6-year-old gets $6. And
my 7-year-old gets $7.
And that will be simple for me and not a headache for me. But they're going to learn to be financially responsible.
Well, no, but didn't she also say though that the kids are going to live and she decided if the kids live in the house, if you live here, you got to do chores.
Yeah, if you eat my food and live in my house, you need to be doing chores, and I'm not going to pay you for that. And when people left comments on her blog, they would say the same thing. They'd say, yeah, my kids live in my house, so I expect them to do chores because they live here and they eat food. But then I give them this allowance that's not connected to that. But then the question in my brain was, okay, so what if you have a kid that doesn't help out at home and doesn't do the chores? Are you going to stop feeding them? Are you going to kick your 9-year-old out of the house? What
recourse do you have?
What's the game plan there if you have a kid who doesn't want to cooperate? Are you going to start nagging them? Are you going to put them on a guilt trip? Are you not going to talk to them for a week? What's the big plan there?
And all of a sudden, these grand plans kind of fall flat.
So that's kind of a big question mark. So naturally, I'm like, I think it's better to connect their pay to things that they want to how well they're contributing at home.
That makes sense. Well, no, you had that experience where you knew a family growing up, and they did the same thing where they paid the kids by age. So the 12-year-old got $12 a week, the 8-year-old got $8 a week, the 5-year-old got $5 a week.
Yes, and it actually created a little bit of resentment because some of the younger kids were actually contributing more at home than some of the older kids. Some of the older kids wouldn't lift a finger.
No, we've talked about that in the past. Teenage retirement.
Yeah,
I'm 16. Like, I don't need to work anymore.
And I'm too busy, Mom.
Yeah.
Not cleaning their room, not doing their chores. Yet when it came to allowance time, the older kids were getting paid almost double that of some of the younger kids, simply because they were older. So therefore, they deserved a better allowance. And so, if you were that kid, how would that make you feel?
Kind of demotivates you to help out. And I like what you said though. The not animosity, resentment, where you resent your parents, you resent your older sibling, like. Why I'm working harder than they are, yet they're getting more money. My parents aren't being fair, and my older sibling is milking it, and I'm stuck holding the bag. Like, I don't know. That just seems like that's a recipe for disaster. That doesn't engender family unity. I will say that.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I don't think it did in that family.
So, expectation number one, when giving a kids an allowance is that you're going to raise someone who works and earns money. And that doesn't really seem to be happening when people give their kids an allowance, by and large. Expectation number 2 is that giving your kids an allowance will raise them to become, or will teach them to pay bills and obligations on time.
So, and keep in mind, this is the definition of a financially responsible adult. And it's the expectation of the allowance. Yeah. And so one of the characteristics of a financially responsible adult is that they pay their bills and obligations on time. So how does...
That's literally how the credit companies determine your credit worthiness.
So how does...
They track that stuff.
How does paying your child an allowance teach them to pay bills and obligations on time?
It doesn't, because they have no bills and obligations. How would it possibly... Like, okay, if you're like, hey, Billy, here's the money that you're going to need for football. Well, that's one thing. But no, allowances by default aren't like that. They're like, here's money, go spend on whatever you want. Wasn't that your experience when your parents did an allowance, Hannah? Did they say, go spend this money? Wasn't that the idea?
Yeah, it was just my pocket money. It was my money to, you can do what you want with this. And I think that's how most parents are. It's like, oh, there's your allowance. Go spend it on what you want. And so
even though they have this expectation that somehow it's going to teach them to learn to pay bills and obligations on time, but they don't give them bills or obligations. So how could it possibly teach that?
So one mom blogger, and I've mentioned this before, she called bologna sandwich on this. She said, okay, so, people say that this is going to teach my kids to be financially responsible. And that's not what I'm seeing. I give them all this money, and I'm already giving them a lot of stuff for free. And then I'm giving them more money on top of that. And they just go blow it on toys and garbage and all sorts of stuff, movie tickets. And she's like, how is that even remotely preparing them to be financially responsible? When my husband and we bring home money, most of our money goes towards our bills and obligations. We can only spend a small part of our income on frivolous things. And yet I'm teaching my kids that, hey, you got money? Here, let it burn a hole in your pocket. It's for you to play with.
If you have money in your hands, it's for fun.
It's for fun. And she's like, that's not preparing them to be responsible.
Nor is it reality.
Yeah.
Well, no, but that brings up a good point. So you give your kids an allowance, and then one day when they turn 18 or go off to college, and all of a sudden, what? Now they're responsible for clothes, rent, utilities, and they're like, what do I do?
And that's when they get a credit card.
Well, no, because they're used to anytime they had money, they could spend it on however they want. And now all of a sudden they can't. That's going to be a real shocker.
Yeah.
It's going to be a real wake-up call. Maybe that's not the most effective way.
Yeah, that's a lot of stress all at once.
But unfortunately, that is one of the expectations when giving kids an allowance is that they'll learn to pay bills and obligations. But once again, that expectation kind of falls flat.
Is that really going to teach them to be financially responsible?
No. And I think, and that's part of the problem, Hannah, is I think because nobody's actually thought it through or spelled it out or explained it, and this is just kind of a tradition in our country, parents don't realize that what their expectations are and the fact that what they're doing will never meet their expectations.
Well, part of it is they use words like, it'll teach them to be financially responsible, but they never break down what it means to be financially responsible and go, okay, wait, how is that leading to that? And so that's what we're doing right now. We're saying, okay, this is what it means to be a financially responsible adult. Okay, how is the allowance teaching this?
So far, it's 0 for 2.
Yeah, how are your children developing these skills by handing them money each week? So, all right, next one.
Expectation number 3 is that handing kids an allowance will teach them discipline and foresight to set money aside for future goals and emergencies. Again, to be a responsible adult, which is what everybody should do.
Yeah, and one article in U.S. News and World Report, when they were talking about the pros of an allowance, they're like, yeah, because it's going to teach them to save for things they want, because 1 week they'll blow all their money, and they'll realize they don't have money for something else they want, and so they're going to have to save up for it. So it's going to teach them to save their money and have a savings plan. And so that was listed as one of the pros of an allowance. But what was interesting is that's the expectation. That's the reasoning. But the study, okay, what was the name of the group that did the study?
The American Institute of CPAs.
The American Institute of CPAs. They did a study on allowance. They commissioned a study on it. And they interviewed 1,000 families about their allowance and their allowance habits. And the thing that was shocking about it was they discovered that only 3% of the kids who received an allowance had any sort of savings.
How much?
3%. So expectation, reality. Expectation, your kids are going to learn to save. Reality, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, 97% of them are not doing that. So.
97% don't care one iota about savings. So, unfortunately, this whole idea of handing your kids money in the form of an allowance and expecting that to teach your kids to plan ahead is a bunch of hooey. It won't happen. And that was the other thing in this study that the CPA group they commissioned. They found that what did the kids spend their money on though? Was it like, oh, they spent it they spent it on a bike, or they spent it on school books or art supplies? No. The vast majority of the money was spent on outings with friends, devices and downloads, and toys. In other words, fun. The money was not spent in any way on helpful things or useful things. It was just basically money to blow, and with not a second thought about savings or the future.
So yeah, if your goal is, hey, I want my kid to have pocket money, I want them to have money to blow, then you have the right expectation. But if you're expecting for it to be teaching them financial responsibility, money management skills, that's not happening.
Yeah, and that unfortunately is the expectation, that it's going to teach them management skills, and it doesn't. So expectation number 3 kind of falls flat, which leads to expectation number 4. When giving kids an allowance, parents expect that it will teach them to budget.
Budget. Okay.
Sorry, I laughed. I don't mean to laugh, but this expectation is so ridiculous to me. And I'll back up a second. First of all, I think there's a problem when we use the word budget, because people, when they hear the word budget, they cringe. There's this part of their heart that shrinks. Their stomach gets turned in knots. They just the hair on the back of their neck stands up. Their skin gets all pimply. Like they get goosebumps all over their arms. They just I don't know the budget, because it's this bad thing.
It's a dirty word.
It
really.
is, because you're going to go to a budget motel. It means you have no money, you're super cheap, you can't spend anything, and you got to be stingy. Like, that's unfortunately
I'm on a budget. That means I can't spend money.
It's like saying I'm on a diet. I can't eat. is what it means.
It's the equivalent.
Same idea.
And that's not actually what a budget is, but that's most people's perception. And the reason I say it's people's perception is because also from U.S. News and World Report, they had one article where they took top financial advisors and asked them, hey, what are the number one mistakes that parents are making with their money? Mm-hmm. And the top 2 listed were about that the parents weren't setting a good example for their kids. And number 2 was they didn't have a written out budget.
Yeah.
A written out plan for their money. And it's funny because you can't teach what you don't know yourself.
Well, that's just it. You're hoping by giving your kids money that they'll learn to budget.
Because that's how you budget.
Well, that's
how you budget.
It's an absurd
but that's
expectation.
Actually not a budget. That's the lack of a budget.
Yeah, but it's because parents themselves don't know how to budget. How could you possibly expect your kid to suddenly glean it if you don't know it yourself? You're not setting an example, and you're not teaching it.
So anyway, they had a review. Another article had a review of, hey, most high schools in most states do not teach any sort of financial management skills. So you probably didn't learn it. There's a good chance you didn't learn it
and
ever.
we've lamented this before
Yeah.
on the podcast where when do you learn this stuff? Who teaches this?
Right.
Nobody.
So anyway, they had a really simple like review of, hey, here's how you do a budget.
Here's a budget.
Here's a budget. What you do is you calculate how much money you're going to be earning that year based off of how much money you earn. and then you write down what your expenses are for each month. And then you decide like how much you want to set aside for savings, because you don't want to spend 100% of your income on bills. And then you subtract all that, you see what you have left, and you decide where you want that money to go. What's important. And that's a budget. It's a plan.
That's all it is. It's a spending plan.
Yeah. And
where the money's going to go before you get it, though. That's the key.
Yeah. You make a plan before you get the money. And so you know what you can spend, and you know where your money's going, and you know whether or not you have money for things that you want. And then you can go, hey, I don't have money for things I want. What can I cut out here? And it's empowering because then you can get what you want.
Yeah, but
you know what's going on. But the funny thing is, we have noticed and lamented this many times. There are all these budgeting apps you can buy, for your phone. They're called budgeting apps, but they are not budgeting apps. They're tracking apps. They track your spending. You spent this much money on this. You spent that much money on that. Mm-hmm. That's not budgeting.
Yep.
Budgeting is when you create a plan and you say, do the steps that I just described. It's when you create a plan.
Well,
you
it's
have
easy
it
to see
down.
where you spent your money. It's harder to plan where you're going to
Quite
spend
frankly,
your money.
my bank statement tells me what I spent my money on.
Yeah.
I don't need, but they're tracking apps, but they call them budgeting apps, but they don't budget.
So that's part of the problem is we have a misunderstanding, a wrong definition of budgeting, first of all.
Yeah, that's not what budgeting is. Anyway, so, all right, so we're back to that question. Does handing your kid money each week teach them to create a spending plan?
No, Hannah, when you were a kid, you got an allowance. I did too. It was very short-lived, though. In my family, it was a week. But if I remember it, you said your family, you guys did it longer than that.
Yeah, I was little when I got my first allowance.
Did it teach you
my
to budget?
mom and dad, we were in the car. I remember it very clearly. We were in the car, and my mom and dad turned around and handed me some quarters and dimes and said, "This is for you, Hannah." And I'm like, "It's for me? Why? What for?" "Oh, it's money for you to spend." "What for?" "Oh, it's just money for you. You can save it, you can spend it." And I was like, I don't know, it was equivalent to Halloween, kind of that mind-blowing thing of, wait, everybody's giving out candy for free? Wait, why? Okay, let's do this.
And did it teach you to budget, Hannah?
No, what I did is I put most of I had a piggy bank, and I'd put my money in the piggy bank, and I did that for the rest of my life. And then when I was a teenager, I had a couple $1,000s in there, and I blew it all on really stupid things. Somebody asked me if I wanted to buy a bike, and it was a really expensive bike, and I said, sure, I have the money for that. And I bought myself a really expensive bike. And looking back, I would never, even now, I wouldn't spend that much money on a bike. I don't know. I actually don't even remember why I did that. Because
well, what's the phrase? A fool and his money are soon parted.
Yeah.
Where, Hannah, you and I, both made that mistake.
And the rest of my money I blew on car insurance.
Yep.
And because I didn't know how to shop for it, and I bought the most expensive policy in the world.
Somebody encouraged me, because I had a paper route when I was a kid and I didn't have a budget, and somebody encouraged me to buy something that I didn't need, but because it came from a respectable source, I'm like, oh, okay. And I spent a lot of money on a very expensive bike because I didn't have a spending plan.
I didn't have a spending plan either, and a bike was not one of my things I would have spent my money on.
So this expectation that giving kids an allowance will somehow teach them to learn how to budget is ridiculous. It's like it's an absurd expectation. It's like throwing meat to a tiger and claiming that will teach the tiger to hunt. It just doesn't. I guess we'll talk about that in a second. But this idea that giving kids money will teach them the budget is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, that it will teach them to make a plan for their money, so their money actually goes to the things that they need and want.
Nope.
Just handing them money does not
unfortunately,
do that.
And unfortunately, parents who have that expectation are going to be disappointed. And that leads to expectation number 5, and that is, by giving your kids an allowance, it will teach them to avoid debt. Well, unfortunately, I think we can...
The proof's in the pudding.
We can say rather emphatically, this has not worked out.
Well, okay.
In our country, if
the majority of people are giving their kids an allowance...
Since 1912.
Well, I don't know. All I know is right now, I don't know back in 1912, but right now, the majority of people in America give their kids an allowance. It varies how much, but most people are giving their kids an allowance.
That would suggest that the majority of children are learning to avoid debt, right?
Yeah, and be financially responsible.
Yet if you look at the numbers...
It's not so great. In fact, since 2004, the Wall Street Journal recently had an article like a month ago about how consumer debt since 2004 has gone up by 34%.
In 16 years.
Yeah, and that's adjusted for inflation and consumer debt. That means it's not counting housing debt, because we all know housing's, skyrocketed.
Through the roof, yeah.
But that's people spending money on cars and in debt for their cars.
In the past decade and a half, consumer debt has risen 34%.
Yeah.
Clearly, allowances are not teaching people to avoid debt.
People making about $100,000 a year and more have on average more than $90,000 of consumer debt. People making between $50,000 and $100,000 have more than $30,000 of consumer debt. Wow. It's crushing debt, and it's gotten a lot worse.
Well, no, and that's why.
And so what we're doing, if our big strategy for teaching kids to be good with money and financially responsible, if our big strategy is, hey, we give our kids allowances, it's clearly not working.
Yeah.
The evidence would suggest, hey, that doesn't actually teach this.
Well, no, that study, again, going back to the CPA study, they said, the majority of the parents claimed that they talked to their kids about money. But that's not being reflected on how their kids are spending money, because actions speak louder than words. The kids see how the parents are spending money.
Yeah, but
they're not getting the memo.
They're not
through
actually.
The allowance.
The allowance isn't actually giving them practice of being financially responsible.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's not teaching them those skills and those things that they would need.
And instead, we're seeing a massive rise in consumer debt, crushing consumer debt, which is given rise to people like Dave Ramsey, who is on a mission to help people dig themselves out of these giant holes that they've jumped into.
Yeah, well, and when I was reading, all the different people's blogs about should I or should I not pay an allowance, one of the cons of paying an allowance was, well, if your kids mishandle the money, they expect a financial bailout.
Good grief.
And I'm like, okay, that means you're giving them a financial bailout if they're expecting it.
Why
would they expect that if you're that door isn't open? So one person was like, yeah, they're always expecting a financial bailout if they spent their money on something stupid and then need it for something else.
But what lesson is that teaching them?
I'm like, oh, well, that's going to contribute to the, hey, I'll just get a credit card, or I'll, find some other. It's not actually teaching the lessons that are going to take them in the right direction financially.
So that's kind of those are the 5 main expectations that are associated with allowances, whether overt or I don't know what would be the term, where the parents are explicit about that's what they want, or it's kind of subconscious. These are the 5. They hope that by giving their kids an allowance, they'll become They'll become financially responsible adults.
They never, but they never define. They're like, I want them to learn to handle money. I want them to have financial literacy. I want them to, they use these terms, but they never think about what these terms actually mean.
I want them to learn how to budget and save. And it turns out that as we've broken it down, allowances actually don't really help with any of those things. Those 5 expectations almost universally fall flat. And here's the problem, what muddies the water, Hannah, is there are always going to be those kids, no matter what, they're going to pick up on things. And there's always going to be that kid who, is financially smart and savvy and picks up and goes, oh, okay, I get it. I'll take the money and I'll put some of it in savings, or I'll invest it here, and they'll be fine.
Yeah. We have a son. In fact, we called him Captain Moneypants before we had this business. And we actually named this after him. But if we had been terrible parents and hadn't taught him anything about money, he would have figured it out.
Yeah.
Because he enjoys numbers and he enjoys, he's just into that. And he's meticulous.
A money guy. He's
and
just
he
a money
thinks
guy.
about things and makes decisions carefully. That's just who he is.
There are people like that who are just like that. There are going to be kids like that.
Yeah. No matter what we did, he would still be careful with his money.
But by and large, we can say with a high degree of certainty that allowances aren't doing what parents are hoping. They're just not meeting up with expectations. So that's the allowance. There you go. So in this corner, in the allowance corner, there you go. That's the fighting style, and it's not so great. Now we're going to go over to the other corner where we got Captain Moneypants. And let's see how Moneypants kind of stacks up here.
Yeah, let's go through those same expectations.
So how does Moneypants, or does Moneypants help children become financially responsible adults? Does it? And I think proof's in the pudding. I think first off, Hannah, you mentioned our one son who is he's always been good with money. He just always had money, was always smart with his money, always made good financial decisions. And I have no qualms, no worries that he's going to go and be financially just fine. But we have another child who's on her own, who has since left the nest, who, when she was younger, money would burn a hole in her pocket. She was extremely impulsive. Now, don't get me wrong, she was very generous, and she would buy lavish gifts for her friends and family members. And she was very generous with her money.
Yeah, always very generous.
She was incredibly impulsive, and she could not hold on to $1 for the life of her. It just would disappear.
Yeah, and and also she had like what we call a yellow personality, where
number one
value.
Hey,
I want to have fun.
Yep.
let's go do that. That's fun.
And nobody could tell her what to do otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, we put her on Moneypants, and here she is now. She's 20.
She turned 20.
Just turned 20, and she pays for her own housing, pays for her own food, own clothes, own makeup, own jewelry, her own schooling. And on top of that, she saved up $10,000 in cash to buy her dream car. It's a used car, but it was
she researched all the cars. She had one in mind that it was the car she wanted. And
I'm going to point this out. She even called and asked Dad for advice, whether she should finance. And I was very proud of myself. I'm like, no, and no. That's the worst. Horrible idea. Don't go into debt. And she listened. And she saved up enough money, and she's thrilled. She's thrilled with her purchase.
Yeah. Oh, and she buys her own car insurance.
Her own everything.
Yeah, everything.
She's financially independent.
100%, but she's debt free. She's debt free, and but this is incredible because that's not her personality. That was not her trajectory. No. That is not her personality. And so when we say the proof's in the pudding, if this child can be that financially responsible,
anybody can.
Yeah,
and everybody should.
Yeah,
it's totally doable.
But if I was pointing out my other kid, it would be like, that's we can't actually take credit for that. That's a personality thing.
Yeah.
But this was contrary to personality.
And it's interesting though, Hannah, you mentioned though that it also affects who she dates. She actually doesn't like she doesn't like dating people who are financially irresponsible. It
It
gives her
stresses
anxiety.
her out. Yeah, it stresses her out. Where she's like, you didn't think about that purchase at all. Wait, when we get married, are you going to do that?
Yeah. So she actually even
no.
she even dates financially responsibly.
Yeah, actually, yeah, she's dating someone extremely financially responsible
Right now she is.
now.
Yeah. So Money Pants actually has the exact same expectations as parents who give their kids allowances. Nothing has changed. So they're the same 5 basic expectations that if you use Money Pants, this is what you can expect. You're going to raise financially responsible adults. Someone who works and earns money for their expenses, someone who pays bills and obligations on time, someone who has discipline and foresight to set money aside for future goals and emergencies, someone who creates a spending plan and sticks to it, and somebody who avoids debt. Those are the same 5 expectations that parents have with an allowance. Let's see how they stack up though when it comes to Money Pants. So expectation number one, you're expecting someone who works and earns money, who works hard and earns their money. Well, that's the nice thing about Money Pants. All the jobs are clearly laid out. Everyone has to have jobs in order to earn money. And it's neat because you can say, oh, if you want money, here are the jobs that we expect. And all of a sudden there's this great association with money and work ethic. And the other thing is and that was one of the complaints is when parents would give kids chores, it was an added burden on the parents because now they got to track the chores, they got to inspect the chores, they got to keep track of what each job requires and who does what, and they're doing the rotating job charts, and it sounds like a big headache because it is. But with Money Pants, it's all right there. It makes job management easy. You keep the same job for an entire year. The app automatically tallies your money, automatically tracks your progress. It has these clear checklists of whether the job is done or not. And on payday, or anytime you earn money, it distributes that money that you earned to the piggy banks. Like, not too shabby. Expectation met. So, expectation number 2 is that,
Well, with expectation number 1, the kids get a very clear sense that if they want to earn money, they need to work for it.
Right.
And they carry that with them for the rest of their lives of, oh, I want that. Okay, how do I work for it? And it's not this, oh, I have to work. Wait, what? It's.
I'm so used to people handing me money.
Yeah, they jump at opportunities that require work. Mm-hmm. They're not like, I don't want to do that. They're like, okay, that's what I want. Yeah, they're ready. They're ready to work for it.
So expectation number 2 is that kids will learn to pay bills and obligations on time. They'll become these responsible adults.
Well, with an allowance, they didn't have bills and
so it was really kind of a moot point. You couldn't. How would you learn that if you never have that? I don't know. I want you to learn how to tie your shoes, but I'm never going to give you shoes. You're never going to have shoes. Like, how would you ever learn? Right.
Money Pants, the whole idea is that you're taking some of the financial responsibilities of, hey, instead of me paying for soccer, you're going to pay for soccer, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to earn it.
By doing jobs around the house, developing your habits and your superpowers, and contributing here at home and managing your own money.
Yeah, and so it gives them some mock bills to pay. So you have soccer registration coming up. Yeah. You have
soccer cleats, jersey.
Yeah, or you have each month you have to pay for dance.
Yeah.
And so they have these financial obligations.
And if you don't earn enough money, there won't be enough money in the piggy bank for you to pay your bills. And so it teaches them really quickly, oh, wait, I need to work, and I need to work consistently in order to have enough money to pay my bills on time. Oh, I see how this works. And the thing is, though, if they don't earn enough money, the app will actually dip into their fund money and take that money and put it in the piggy bank that for dance registration or for soccer registration, these upcoming bills. So it's actually kind of a little primer for real life, because if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, you're not going to have fun money.
Yeah, you're not going to be going out to eat or going on vacation.
So it's a little dose of reality there.
Yeah. So, hey, you better make sure you earn the money you're supposed to earn to pay your bills. And if you do a good job on that, then you'll have fun money.
Yeah. And so using this technique actually also eases the transition into adulthood, because it won't be a sudden shock where, wait, I don't have fun money? I need money to
I
pay
can't go out with my friends because...
And why don't I have money for my bills? My bill is due and I don't have money. Well, the app actually takes care of that and helps make sure that when the bill is due, you'll have money in that piggy bank, provided you work. So expectation number 2, that the kids will learn to pay bills and obligations on time.
This is a good start. It's a good bridge into
It's a good introduction.
reality. Yeah.
Yep. Expectation number 3 is that the kids will learn discipline and foresight to set money aside for future goals and emergencies. Well, Moneypants does that in spades. Yeah. It automatically, as soon as you earn any money, it automatically applies the 10, 10, and 10 rule. 10% goes to donations, then the next amount of money goes to pay all the bills, and then 10% goes into savings. And only after bills and savings and everything else, only then does the money go into fun money. So the kids learn by default. The app helps them develop that discipline of donating and helping others first, then putting money into their bills, then putting money into savings, and only then, after they've taken care of those things, only then is there going to be money left over for fun.
Yeah, and it also gets them used to the idea of, hey, 70% of my money goes towards bills. Where how many adults, buy a house that pushes them to the very edge of their income?
No, you're going to be in great shape if your bills never exceed 70% of your income.
Yeah. If they follow, so you have your kids practicing the 10, 10, and 10 rule from the time they're kids.
They're going to be used to it.
There's a much higher likelihood that they're going to follow something similar or the same thing as they become adults, because that's what they're going to be comfortable with. That's what they expect. That's how you do money. That's how it is. That's how it is in their minds, because that's how they grew up doing that.
And the thing is, though, Hannah, they can still make mistakes, especially with the fun money, but it's only 10% of their money.
It's only 10% of their money, and it's their money that they earned, as opposed to...
it's their money, yeah.
I noticed, one of the things I noticed as I researched this and reading just different people's experiences and the different blogs, was when people paid an allowance, the parents still felt like, oh, this was my money.
They had a vested interest in how the money was spent. Sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
And so instead of being like, oh, man, they blew their money, it was like, no, you're not allowed blowing the money. That's my money. And no, you're not. And they would say, no, you're not spending it on that, or you're not.
Or we're going back to the store. You're taking that back right now.
Yeah, that's too much for that. And whereas with Moneypants, hey, they've got their fun money. They, obviously they can't buy something illegal, or,
there are limits to what they can buy.
Drugs and alcohol or something like that.
But they will make mistakes.
But if they buy something stupid with their fun money, it doesn't stress you, the parent, out. You're like, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's a bummer.
You're disappointed. Oh, man, that's frustrating. But you don't feel frustrated because, that was their fun money.
Because you're divested from that money. It's no longer your money. It's theirs.
Yeah.
And they need to make those decisions, and it's awesome.
And it's only 10% of their money.
And they're not gonna create some sort of catastrophic event that destroys them financially.
And they're more upset about it than you are.
Which is a great teaching
Yes, they're
method.
way more upset about it than you are. So that's, it's you just can feel sorry for them. You don't feel angry at them.
Expectation number 3. Check. Which leads to expectation number 4, and that is that if you're using Moneypants, that your kids will learn to budget. You want your kids to learn to budget.
Okay, Moneypants does an exceptional job with this. As we explained what budgeting was, where you look at how much money you're going to earn for that year, and then you create a plan with that money. Moneypants does this. It makes it easy to do. It's all right there for you.
Hannah, I love this so much. This is something I've wanted for so long.
Yeah. It's just the most useful tool. Okay, so when you're setting up the app, it will tell your child, hey, this year you're going to earn X amount of money.
$1,000.
You're going to earn $1,000 this year. Where do you want it to go? and they can play, go, okay, well, I wanted to go to scout camp and
And I want to spend money on
yeah,
clothes.
mom and dad say I need to learn a musical instrument. I want to do the guitar. And they
Soccer's
have to,
coming up.
They have to go, okay, that's, this is how much money that costs. And
Okay, this is the coolest thing. For some reason, when you set boundaries, people become very creative.
yeah.
And the kids go, wait a minute, football's $400 and I only have $600 total. And
How am I going to make that work?
Okay, but maybe they have a scholarship. Oh, what if I talk to the coach?
They have that fundraising thing that I can
and
participate in.
And all of a sudden, they get creative and they come up with really clever ideas on how to stretch their money. And the thing about Moneypants is you can't even earn a dime until you have that budget in place.
Yeah.
You have to have your spending plan in place before you can even start earning money. And we've talked about this, Hannah. When, for some reason, when you have money in hand,
your brain goes.
your brain shuts off. And it's just the weirdest thing. If you don't have a plan in place, your
the money's there.
Your money disappears, and it's always on stupid stuff. And you always go, where'd the money go? And we talked about that where, lottery winners, they can't account for where all the money went. They don't know because it grows wings and disappears. We did that blog, Help, My Money's Running Away, where when you don't have a plan, your money does whatever anybody else tells it. It does what other people tell it to do, not you. So you got to tell your money what to do. And that's Moneypants does this in spades. I love this. And so to answer the question.
Every year your kids have to do this. They have to sit down and create a plan for their money. And this exercise teaches them what an actual budget is. Mm-hmm. It's the correct steps for creating a budget. And it happens at the right time before they earn any of the money. And this will teach them to be financially responsible. They will know what a budget is.
Yeah, because that's all it is.
And
it's a very
they'll have had
simple budget.
year after year of practicing of creating a budget and understanding what it is and understanding, when they check their money, they'll see the piggy banks and they'll go, oh, yeah. I want that money to go to football. And I do want that money to go for clothing. And they'll see the power in that and they'll want to keep doing it because it puts them at ease.
It's empowering.
It's empowering and it puts them at ease. They will not like not having a budget.
It'll stress them out to not have a budget.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so you want to raise them this way. This is how you do it. You have them create a budget, and Moneypants, the app, makes it easy to do.
As opposed to an allowance, handing somebody money is not the same as creating a plan.
Yeah.
Not the same.
Yeah, it two different things. Two different things.
So, expectation number 4, met.
Yes.
Expectation number 5 is that giving kids these opportunities will help them learn to avoid debt. Again, Moneypants.
Oh, you know what? We missed a point about the budgets. We mentioned that a lot of parents don't understand budgeting and therefore they can't teach it to their kids.
Right.
One of the benefits of Moneypants is it's not just for kids. It's the whole family.
Oh, right.
The whole family's using Moneypants. Including the mom and dad. And they're earning their personal money as well. And they're creating budgets and sticking to budgets as well.
So the kids are seeing the parents do it. So the parents are setting a good example. And the kids have their own budgets that they're monitoring.
Yeah,
and
so even if a parent, that's not something they've done or they're comfortable with.
Which we've discovered most parents aren't.
They'll go through the same steps and set the example, which is huge.
Very powerful when helping kids develop these new habits.
Yeah, because if the kids are like, oh, I'm following a budget, but look at my parents, they just do whatever they want and they're being really irresponsible with their money.
Yeah.
And putting everything on a credit card. That's going to be
that
was listed as one of the top financial mistakes that parents make.
Yep.
And so it naturally resolves that by having parents participate in the same thing, setting the correct example of budgeting. And
that goes a long way. So, expectation number 4, met. Expectation number 5 is that parents want their kids to learn to avoid debt. And I think there's the general consensus that debt is bad. But handing your kids money is not the same as teaching them to avoid debt. But with Moneypants, it's super easy because in the app, you cannot spend money you don't have. It's all cash-based. So you can't actually go into debt using Moneypants because if you don't have the cash, you can't spend it.
Yeah, well, even if it's something like, oh, I need to borrow the family credit card to make this online purchase, the app won't let you do that unless
You have enough money in that piggy bank.
there's money in that piggy bank.
Yep.
So it doesn't, in no case does it let you go into debt.
And I love that. And Moneypants teaches kids to avoid debt because it won't allow them to go into it. And going back to the whole idea of bailing kids out, if a kid needs more money, mom and dad, you don't just give them more money because that's a horrible lesson you're going to teach your kids.
Yeah, Moneypants has a provision for this. It's
Yeah.
called Job Jar. Oh, you need more money? Great. We've got more jobs here that you can,
Yep.
more
And you can-
opportunities, or you can go work for the neighbors.
You can dig yourself out of this financial hole that you've gotten yourself into.
Yeah, well, it just if unexpected expenses come up or whatever, Moneypants has opportunities there waiting for them.
Opportunities, not bailouts.
Yes.
And I like that. So, expectation number 5 met. And so I think the clear winner here.
Just a second.
Is he pooping?
We have a guest on the show. Oh, he's smiling now. Your tummy feel better? Yeah. Okay. Like you said at the beginning, we have infants through college.
Yep. Here's one of the infants.
Here's one of the infants. He's done eating. Yeah.
So I think it's abundantly clear, Hannah, that Moneypants beats out the allowance any time of the day. It's hardly even a fair contest. But I think it'd be clear. I think it would be fair to say that giving kids money as an attempt to teach them financial responsibility is kind of a myth. And it bothers me because it has no basis in reality. I'm going to hand my child money and that will teach them to be financially responsible. No, it won't. No, it will not. It's a horrible theory. I don't know who came up with that, but it's not even like a theory. It's like a lie masquerading as a theory because it's just somebody's idea that got passed off as a theory because there's no evidence that would be effective. We said it before. It's like throwing meat to a tiger and claiming that that's going to teach the tiger to hunt. You know, here you've got this tiger. It's been raised in captivity. It's at the zoo, and they're about to release it into the wild. And they're like, how are we going to teach this tiger to hunt? Oh, I know. We're going to throw meat at it. And every day you throw meat at it, and is that going to teach the tiger to hunt? No, you're actually going to get the opposite effect. It's going to teach the tiger to rely on the zookeeper to feed it.
Yeah, it's going to be out there in the Sahara or in the
wherever, not the Sahara.
The savannah. It's sitting there waiting. Hey, where's that meat that shows up?
Yeah, and pretty soon it's going to be meat itself because it's not going to last very long. But on the flip side, if you were to maybe send in a rabbit to the lion cage or a mouse or whatever and give it a chance to,
chase something around.
It maybe at first it won't know what to do, but it gets hungry enough. Those instincts are going to kick in and it's going to be like, wait a minute, that looks like food. And pretty soon it'll pick up on it. Oh, that was tasty. And then the next time you give them the opportunity, they're like, oh, I know what that is. That's food. And so instead of giving handouts, you're giving the lion or the tiger, what did I say, lion or tiger, whichever it was.
Opportunities.
Instead of giving handouts, you're giving opportunities.
And then you throw other lions in there that do know how to hunt. And,
Yeah, what, baby
you've
lions?
got good examples. Oh. No, you have an example to follow. Like
exactly.
There are other more effective tactics, basically, than just handing it a...
Right. Well, no. So handing kids money is really ineffective. Giving kids money is like giving a teenager a gun and saying, "Oh yeah, that'll teach him gun safety." No.
Those are two different things.
Or giving a teenager a car, claiming that it will teach them how to safely drive it. No, And it doesn't work that way. You have to sit down with the kid and explain things to them and give them opportunities.
And they have to practice.
And
they have to practice.
Well, no, they have to learn the rules of the road. They have to get proper training. They have to practice. They have to have somebody monitoring them. They have to report back. They have to pass tests. Like, you don't just suddenly learn how to drive a car safely because you have a car. Anyway, so the
it's the same logic.
It's the exact same logic. But then there's the flip side, and this is where parents are like, well, then let's get rid of allowances altogether.
Well, yeah, that one mom blogger who noticed that
it's too hard, too complicated, too much work.
No,
it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Let's just forget it.
Yeah, that was actually the conclusion of these different mom bloggers. One who said it was too hard, another who said, hey, it's not actually me giving the kids an allowance. It's not actually teaching them financial responsibility.
It's not working.
All these mom bloggers came to the same conclusion.
Yep.
They said, I'm not doing it.
Because it
doesn't
doesn't work.
It doesn't work. I'm not doing it. So they threw it out. But wait a minute. How is your kid supposed to learn how to manage money if they don't have money?
Well, there's luck. You can. There's the hope and pray method.
They do need to handle money.
I hope and pray my kids learn it because I have no idea how to teach them.
They do need to handle money. They do need to have money that they're learning to spend and budget and all that. But you can't just hand them money.
Yeah.
And expect that to be enough. That's only part of the equation.
Well, no, that's just it. Allowances. Okay, I'm not going to throw them out with the bathwater. I think that's a bad idea. I think an allowance is a good place to start, but I think it's only part of the equation. It reminds me of the mom who was telling us that Moneypants doesn't work because she offered her kids money and they weren't interested. And it's like, yeah, because you didn't turn off the TV. Like you didn't give them any motive. Of course, no kid's going to want it. If a kid has everything that they want, 25 cents or 10 cents for doing the dishes is not going to motivate them. But if all of a sudden they're like, oh, now you're paying for your own soccer. Oh, motivation just went way up because they're like, oh, I have some bills that I need to pay. And that's 10 cents. That's 25 cents at the end of the week. I'll get my bonus. That's going to be an extra $3.
That mom, her kids did love soccer.
Yep.
So,
but that's just it. Where allowances, I think these moms that throw their hands up in the air saying they don't work. Well, it's because it's only part of the solution. It's like putting together a car and you got the wheels and the chassis and the body and the engine and the steering wheel. And you're like, well, this car is stupid because it doesn't go. Well, it's because you didn't put in the engine. It's missing an engine. But you can't say cars are stupid just because the car you made doesn't work. Cars are a vehicle. The car you made is missing some key components, or maybe you've got the engine and the chassis and the body, but
you got to put gas in it.
Or there are no wheels. Like you have to have the whole shebang, the whole thing. Anyway, so I think
it is important for your kids to have money. That is correct, but don't think that alone is going to get you places.
Right. And so Moneypants, when it comes to the comparison between Moneypants and Allowance, Moneypants is so much smarter than an Allowance. Moneypants is the vehicle for teaching financial responsibility. It achieves the vision of all the expectations of an allowance and then some. And that's why we say, in the bout between an allowance and Moneypants, there's no contest. Moneypants wins hands down.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Oh, you want me to say that?
Yeah.
And so in the fight between an allowance and Moneypants, ding, 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 we have a winner. It's Captain Moneypants by a landslide. And that's all we have to say for today. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please tell your friends they may want to listen to. And if you have a suggestion for a future podcast, go to our website under support and click Contact Us. Send us an email and we'll get right on it. And that's it for today. Enjoy a Falcon Jasper, capriciously calculated, continuous chorus cacophony. We'll see you next time.